Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Stitch, the movie, featuring the voices of David Chase, Chris Saunders, Tia Carrere, David Ogden Stiers, Kevin McDonald, Ving Rhames, D. Bradley Baker, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Jeff Bennett, directed by Tony Craig and Bob's Ganaway, excuse me. Now, I have not seen this movie before. I'm gonna be in unfamiliar territory for the rest of the time, but let's just get straight into this. In the Turo system, we get a ship of Dr. Hamstervale, voiced by Jeff Bennett, where he sees Captain Gantu, returning voice of Kevin Michael Richardson, to get away to capture Jumba's machine of experiments while in Hawaii. We get David Coena, returning voice of D. Bradley Baker, Nani, returning voice of Tia Carrere, Jumba, returning voice of David Ogden Stiers, Pleakley, returning voice of Kevin McDonald, Lilo, David Chase, and Stitch, Chris Saunders, where they have a barbecue with the cousins as their one big happy ohana, aka family. As if you haven't seen the last movie, you wouldn't understand this, but Stitch ruins the barbecue, and we get to nighttime where Stitch is depressed because he's too different, while David and Nani go out for dinner as Lilo and Stitch are babysitted by Pleakley and Jumba, as Pleakley cooks dog food for dinner, and Stitch asks Jumba about how he has no cousins until Captain Gantu comes to the house in Hawaii, not for Stitch, but to get Jumba's experiments, as experiment 625 gets loose, and Jumba goes to space with Captain Gantu, while Pleakley is hidden in a treasure chest with the other experiments. And where is this going? I honestly don't know, and I believe I don't really care. Lilo and Stitch gets Jumba's spaceship to start and get Jumba out of Captain Gantu's captivity, while until Captain Gantu hits their ship and uses the hyperspeed to get away from Lilo and Stitch as they crash land back to Hawaii. And the animation in this is kind of a bad as well. And I noticed some of the lines were used from the first movie, like the way Stitch says hi, for example. As Stitch finds Pleakley in the treasure chest and finds out about the previous 625 experiments and says to never ever open the treasure chest. And Nani gets home from looking for Lilo, and David was home after the first time after their date, and Nani gets upset with Pleakley about how things were under control as Nani calls Cobra Bubbles, returning voice of Ving Rhames. And Pleakley calls a bunch of space commanders until he finds Jumbo, which sounds impossible. And Lilo and Stitch lets out experiment 221 to run out around Hawaii, and he's an electrical version of Stitch, and the acting was not as good as the last movie, which is not a good thing for this movie. Captain Gantu brings Jumba to Hamstervale as he acts all demanding to Captain Gantu, which feels, in my opinion, pretty annoying, as Hamstervale is an annoying character as he interrogates Jumba about where his experiments are at, and Captain Gantu lets experiment 625 come back to life, and Captain Gantu and Hamstervale take cover until 625, eats sandwiches, while Lilo and Stitch hop into the school bully's backyard and they act as annoying as the last film, and Stitch almost spits acid on the bullies while they're looking for 221, but can't find out, and they get back home to see Nani's catching them home very late, as Pleakley calls Hamstervale to find Jumba, and Jumba answers to him as Hamstervale, and Captain Gantu gets alerted, and Hamstervale demands the other experience, while Pleakley annoys me as well, as these are the most annoying characters in this movie, which feels like a TV movie, despite this is a straight-to-video movie, and this is not a very satisfying one, to be blunt. Cobra Bubbles arrives at the house in Hawaii in the next morning and waits for Hamstervale's next call while Pleakley asks some rather dumb questions, as Lilo and Stitch say they're not going to take any action until Stitch steals Cobra Bubbles' car and asks questions about where Experiment 221 is at, and they do find him at a restaurant with a Stitch going after 221, shocking him until Lilo captures 221 as it mimics Stitch, and he believes they're cousins, and Lilo realizes Ohana, meanwhile, Pleakley, Nani, and Cobra Bubbles get a call from Hamstervale, and they go to the lighthouse to return the experiments to Hamstervale. And they trade the experiments for Jumba as they lost an experiment, and Lilo comes to him with 221 and aka Sparky, and now they decide to name all the experiments, as this plot is so dumb for a movie that's an hour long. The Grand Councilwoman comes in and almost fires Hamstervale until 221 comes to the ship and to make it not fire, while Lilo and Stitch get in the spaceship to release the experiments, while Jumba is back on Earth, as Lilo and Stitch release the experiments from Hamstervale's ship through the window and lands all over Hawaii, as Lilo and Stitch get captured by Captain Gontu, as well as imprisoned, as this feels completely pointless, as Hamstervale holds Lilo and Stitch as he tries to clone Stitch for his personal army, as Lilo gets trapped in a glass cage, and Stitch almost gets cut in half until Sparky releases Stitch because he's his cousin, and puts Hamstervale in the same trap as he puts Stitch in, while Stitch gets Lilo out of captivity and gets teleported, and Stitch is successful and gets out, while Lilo and Sparky and Captain Gontu crash lands on Earth and Hawaii, and they make Captain Gontu a dumb character, whereas last time he was menacing in while Lilo, Stitch, and Sparky bring Hamstervale back to Earth and to get arrested by the Grand Councilwoman, while she has no choice but to leave the experiments on Earth for Ohana purposes, as Sparky stays on the lighthouse, which hasn't lit up in many years, as the experiments come to life and find a home, and every single one of them, as there are 623 experiments. And after the credits, Pleakley and Jumba get abandoned by the Grand Councilwoman, and this climax was bad, but not all that bad. But how bad was this movie? Let's get to the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.7 out of 10. I don't know where this movie went, and I honestly don't kind of care, as this is kind of a bad sequel to Lilo and Stitch, as this animation in this movie was kind of bad, and some of the lines felt like they were repeated from the first movie, like the way it says hi, for example. And the acting by the voice actors are not as good as the last movie, which is not a good thing for this movie. The villain in this movie is annoying, as he was an annoying character, as I was annoyed by these characters in this movie, as it should have been a TV movie, despite this is a straight-to-video movie. And I hate to be blunt, but this is not a satisfying straight-to-video movie, in my opinion, as the plot is so dumb for a movie that's an hour long. This movie is completely pointless, as I like Captain Gontu in the last film, but because he was menacing. But here they just made him dumb enough as he is in this movie, as this is a weak non-recommendation for this movie, as the climax made this sort of a bad movie, and at the end of the day, I wouldn't watch this again, but we'll see how better or worse the sequels will get. But yeah, I can't recommend this to people. I just can't do it. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time we'll be back with Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch. And until then, bye-bye!